In Michigan, person-centered plans are developed by a full IDT with provider participation. In Wisconsin, a care plan can be developed just by the social worker, nurse, and the participant and/or the guardian, omitting provider participation. So, one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting was that there was a report called "The Case for Inclusion" that was issued by the United Cerebral Palsy, a national group, and they rated Michigan, which has a managed care system, as #1 in the country in promoting productivity, which is all about employment and opportunities for employment. So I did a little contrast between Michigan's MCOs and Wisconsin's MCOs on that. In Michigan, actually providers, I checked this, by the way, with people in Michigan to make sure I was making accurate statements. Providers are members of the planning team in Michigan. They're not necessarily included here, although they can be requested in most cases by the families and guardians if you insist. There's a defined financial risk sharing between MCOs and the state in Michigan. There's really not risk sharing and really outliers not being properly addressed in our rate setting system, although there's some kind of adjustment that just started to be made this last year for them. I don't think it's sufficient. Person-centered plans are actually funded at 100%. So once you have a plan that's set up as a part of that IDT meeting in Michigan, it's funded. There's no question about it. In fact, over there, some of the families will bring lawyers to the care planning meetings because they know that it's iron bound, and if something's in the plan, they're mandated to receive it. Here, our services are subjected to the RAD process. The RAD process being the resource allocation decision-making process. And that's to try to find the most cost-effective service to meet the individual's outcomes. In Michigan, it's pretty clear because there's a long history of the groups that were made managed care organizations. They were the county mental health and developmental disability boards that became the managed care organizations. So they had the expertise already there in these issues, and they understand best practices. In many cases, the managed care organizations actually have some limited expertise in intellectual and developmental disabilities, and certainly at the state level, we've seen that center of expertise disappear. And then the other thing I want to point out is that we mix these various long-term care groups. So we've got people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we've got people with physical disabilities, we've got people who are frail and elderly. And I want to just contrast some of the things that people with intellectual and developmental disabilities require versus the frail elderly. For example, a person with intellectual and developmental disability can come into our family care system at age 18, they can stay till they die, maybe at age 90. Frail elderly, typically, they enter towards the end of their lives. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities often need assistance, most often need assistance in directing their supports, although some can direct their own supports. Frail elderly can participate in directing their care unless they have dementia or some other reason why, or just no energy to direct their care, but they can more often participate. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities, their supports are supposed to be based anyway, on the concepts of normalization, active treatment, community integration, all the things that we've heard about over and over again over the years that our laws are based on. And frail elderly care really is directed at avoiding more costly supports, trying to keep people in their homes, trying to keep them out of the nursing homes. So a lot of times it makes sense to put a lot more services in so they don't have to go into more costly settings. Whereas with the DD population, sometimes the only approach to really save money is to take away funding, take away service authorizations. My top two recommendations, if I was in charge and was able to fix the system, first of all, I think assessments are so crucial. If everything else depends on them, then I think we need to have very valid assessments for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And in my experience and in the judgment of the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, the best tool for that is called the Supports Intensity Scale. I would love it if we could use that for rate setting all the way around. The other thing is that rate setting itself should be more transparent, whether it's to the MCOs or whether it's to the providers. There should be a good rationale for how rates are set. And in fact, we do have some hidden assumptions that drive our funding systems. We can't figure out why changes are being made, why reductions are taking place. There's a series of policy reductions that take place after the actuaries do their work, and all those things go to try to really reduce what's available. The concerns are not just in Wisconsin with some of the potential for harm with managed care to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. In fact, Access wrote a letter. Access is a national organization to which my organization belongs. It's an association of disability service providers. We know that the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Service want to issue sub-regulatory guidance to all states that are considering managed care, as well as those that are already in it, as it relates to people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and how they should be supported. And we hope that that will happen this summer. There's actually a meeting that's scheduled. It's actually been scheduled now for August 27th. It was postponed from August 6th. I'll be attending that meeting. So we've listed a whole list of protections that we think should be in place in plans, and I'm going to skip over a couple things here. One of the things I think that's important all the way around is, there's not a magic wand. It's not a panacea to have managed care in place, and in fact, what the findings of the National Bureau of Economic Research are on managed care in general is that managed care achieves savings largely through reduced prices rather than lower quantities. But in circumstances in which there's actually low reimbursement to start with, there's really not a lot of savings to be achieved except by doing those things, except by reducing prices and reducing services. So I think we have to push to make sure that managed care is properly funded. And that's hopefully where we're going to go with this in the end.